fall, man, it's very tough. And this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and join the Miami Heat.
Miami Heat. That was the conclusion you woke up with this morning.
That was the conclusion I woke up with this morning.
LeBron James left the Cleveland Cavaliers to join the Miami Heat in 2010, making them the instant favorites to win the NBA Finals. James was infamously quoted for promising a slew of titles would come to Miami with his new Heat team.
Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6.
But a long championship-filled dynasty is not what this Heat team found in reality. They would make it to the finals every single year during this window of time, but the first year resulted in a highly disappointing loss to the Dallas Mavericks, 2 back-to-back titles against San Antonio, and then that same Spurs team getting their revenge the following year. Seeing the state of the Heat at the time, LeBron James would then infamously leave the Heat to return to Cleveland that summer. That 4-year window of time in the NBA was one of the most dramatic and entertaining, with the LeBron-led Heat being the center of attention. The narrative went from will LeBron ever win a title to can the Heat three-peat in what felt like the blink of an eye. But with all that being said, it always felt like that Heat team left more on the table. If LeBron returned to that same Heat team, realistically, it would have been a disaster. So we're going to make things interesting by creating our own alternate universe, a simulation full of the most quote-unquote realistic what-ifs that I can come up with. This alternate universe is contingent on 2 areas: Miami's roster and the Eastern Conference landscape. Let's start with the other 2 members of the Big Three. The elephant in the room was the aging D Wade. It was quite clear that Wade was on the back 9 and, well, we can't just turn back the clock. This multiverse isn't that ridiculous. On the other hand, Chris Bosh would run into his blood clot issue the following year. So one you could see from a mile away, the other not so much. So since we're not going to pause D Wade's aging process, we'll just assume that that plays out normally. But let's take away Bosh's blood clot issue and say he was mostly healthy. I mean, it was a very freak thing. Now let's move to the rest of Miami's personnel. Let's try and give the 2014 Heat some help. More help. That 2014 Heat team was in cap hell, so they couldn't afford to bring in any big free agents. We're still going to assume that the Heat would sign Goran Dragic since they needed a point guard, and he filled that role for the Heat excellently for several years. These were the standings at the end of the regular season that year. This was a year where the East was noticeably weaker than the West. It was that fluke year where the Hawks won 60 games and were the #1 seed in the East. Without LeBron back in Cleveland, the Cavs would have been irrelevant. I think it's safe to assume this Heat team would have been anywhere from the 3 to 6 seed. With as much championship experience that team had, I feel pretty confident they would have gotten to the Eastern Conference Finals and met Chicago or Atlanta. Regardless, I like Miami's odds to win the East, which would bring us to the finals where they would have met the start of the Golden State dynasty. Now, would this Heat team drop like flies similar to how the Cavs did? I would like to think no. Now, throughout this entire simulation, this particular year really seems like the Heat's best chance to win another title. So let's just say that Miami defeats the Warriors and the Heat are back on top of the NBA. Now let's fast forward into the 2015 season. I can't take Bosh's blood clot issue out of the picture entirely. I already moved it back by about a year, so at this point, I don't think he'd be able to continue playing. They would have already signed Hassan Whiteside out of the G League, and for the second half of that season, he would be Bosh's replacement. I think it's safe to speculate the finals would be a repeat of the previous year, just like the Cavs and Warriors did for several years. This Heat team still seems like it would be the best in the East, and we're assuming the Warriors would still win 73 games that year and come out of the West. This is where things take a turn. I cannot see LeBron leading this Heat team to a 3-1 comeback like he did with the Cavs. At this point, you would have an aging D Wade playing basketball from November to June for the past 5-ish years. If we're continuing this season, there's absolutely no way he would be healthy for this series. Hassan Whiteside would be exposed for being Hassan Whiteside, And this series would come down to Dragic and James putting a bunch of points up, but coming up short almost every single game. The Warriors would probably win 4-1. This would leave the Heat in a tough spot. Bosh would be done for good, and I still think they would not want to give Wade more money than what he actually was worth at the time, and he would end up leaving to go play elsewhere. If you can hear the thunderstorm outside, you're just going to have to kind of deal with it like I am. They would still retain LeBron, Dragic, and Whiteside, but need to make up for the loss of Wade through free agency. And who would they really be able to afford? Kent Bazemore, Chandler Parsons. This brings us to the next piece of this alternate NBA. Kevin Durant was a free agent that summer. Since the Warriors just won the finals, would they still end up getting Kevin Durant that summer? Yes. I firmly believe that the Warriors did not make a run for KD simply because they lost in the finals. If one of the best players in the world is available and you have the cap space, any team is going to at least try and meet with him. Durant would have still wanted out of OKC, and the Warriors would have still been playing that beautiful brand of basketball that Kevin was seeking. So I think the Golden State super team still would have been formed even in this universe.
I am inevitable.
And in that case, it wouldn't matter who the hell the Heat signed anyway. They would still get annihilated by the Warriors in the finals, even if they made it there. The same thing can be said about the 2017 season 2. The absolute ceiling for Miami clearly would be winning the East. The Warriors were clearly still going to repeat. It wouldn't be until a couple years later where the power dynamic shifted after KD left Golden State, and Toronto still presumably wins the finals in 2019. Now, this is a period of time where a lot happened in the NBA. Kyrie and KD teamed up on the Nets, Paul George and Kawhi teamed up on the Clippers, and instead of AD joining LeBron on the Lakers, I firmly believe that LeBron would have still been able to get Anthony Davis to the Heat instead. I mean, he's still LeBron and it's still Rich Paul. Then the NBA would come to a screeching halt because of the pandemic, which would bring us to this new look Heat team in the bubble. From here, this Miami team would make their way through the bubble, past that up-and-coming Celtics team, to reach the finals against what would probably be the Nuggets. And this would be just like reality, with a LeBron and AD-led team winning a bubble ring and really LeBron's last ring. After that, Milwaukee would still have that post-COVID title run, and then the Celtics would take over the East. Which brings us right to present day. So LeBron would have still won 2 more rings, just like in reality, but he would have given Miami 2 more rings for that franchise. The end result here is kind of irrelevant. Number 1, because it's hypothetical, and number 2, because this simulation just goes to show that by LeBron staying in Miami and the Heat just making sensible roster moves, Chris Bosh miraculously not having blood clots, and the rest of the team staying pretty healthy, there were more titles to be won in Miami. All this really did was prove to me that LeBron did make the right decision leaving the Heat. Now we know that because he obviously was able to bring a championship to Cleveland just 2 years later. But this was nice to do, just to see all the strings that would have had to have been pulled in order to keep that Miami team in title contention. It was just unrealistic. The Big Three Heat were not broken up early. There were no 5, 6, 7 titles waiting for them. They ran their course and LeBron left at the perfect time. So what do you think of my alternate universe? Is it realistic at all? What changes would you make to it? If we get enough people pitching in ideas for what this would look like, we could legit make our own NBA multiverse. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel, especially if you want to see more of these video essays. You could probably imagine these take a while to make. We have a TikTok and Instagram where we post new videos every single day. Those are both linked down in the description below, in addition to our After Further Review Discord, which is where we talk ball throughout the day, and it's completely free to join. Be sure to check out our weekly NBA and NFL podcast, which we host live on this channel every single Wednesday night. And that's it. I'll talk to you all in the next one. Peace. And on the other hand, Chris Bosh, it was quite... Okay, here we go. For real. They would not make it to the finals. What was I saying? But let's take away Bosh's... That's a good one. Chris Blosh. If I was out of focus for 90% of this video, it is what it is. I wasn't on camera that much anyway.